Today we're going to be talking about objects in space. So go ahead and have your notes out in case you need to add pictures or maybe some of your own notes. We're going to start with the big and then go to the small. So first we're going to talk about galaxies. There's a couple different types of galaxies. Barred spiral and spiral are both obviously spiral types. Bar has this line of stars through the middle, where spiral just has kind of a central point. A lot of astronomers think that our Milky Way galaxy is a barred galaxy. Irregular galaxies have no definite shape. Peculiar galaxies are just unusual shapes. Elliptical are kind of more of 3D. They don't really have a definite shape, but they're more elliptical and they're not as flat as the spiral. And then lenticular is, they think it's kind of an older galaxy. It has older stars, and it's mainly made of gas and dust and stuff, but it's not really making any new stars. Next are constellations. These are star formations we see from Earth that people have connected the dots and made them into animals or figures or just objects. We see different constellations throughout the year. Like in December, we would see Orion at midnight. And then as we go through the year, we would see different constellations because of where we are in our orbit. So in June, we wouldn't be able to see Orion anymore because the sun would be too bright and we couldn't see it. So we'd see these other constellations over here. So the constellations change throughout the year, and we see them at different times. Constellations are made of stars. Stars are just giant balls of hot gas, mainly hydrogen and helium, but they can be made of other stuff too. What they're made of affects their color a little bit, but mostly it's the temperature will affect their color also. Just like you have different colors of fire, you're going to have different colors of stars depending on how hot they are. Our sun is kind of an average star, so this is our sun right here, and these are the other types of stars. You can see the temperature, and they're more blue if they're hotter, and then more red if they're cooler. So our sun is kind of average, it's right in the middle. There are some stars that are a lot bigger, and then there are some stars that are smaller too. The reason our sun is special is because it's the one that's closest to us. It's the only one in our solar system. So the sun is very important to us because it's the one we go around. Planets are smaller than stars, so they orbit around the stars. To be considered a planet, it has to orbit a star. It needs to be spherical, and it has to have cleared out its orbit. That means that it's mostly picked up all the rocks and other debris that's in its orbit. It picks them up by usually crashing into them, and then that makes craters. I would know the planets in order. Some people remember it by saying, "My very educated mother just served us noodles." But however you remember it is good, but I would remember them in order starting with the sun. So I would probably write that down in your notes. We're starting to find a lot of planets that are called exoplanets. That means they're not in our solar system. They orbit stars other than the sun. So we're starting to find a lot more. Currently we found 1,963. Most of them being found in the last couple of years. So this is a graph showing the number of planets we've detected in the past few years. But this is inside our galaxy, and inside, so that dot in the middle is our sun, and then the circle around it is where we found most of the planets. So we haven't looked very far yet, and we've already found almost 2,000 planets. Dwarf planets, the only difference is they have not cleared out their orbit. So they still orbit a star. They are spherical, so they're rounded by their gravity, but they have not picked up all the debris that's in their orbit. So if Pluto wants to become a planet again, then it would need to clean out its orbit, or kind of pick up its room, and then it can become a planet. Satellites are anything that orbits a planet. So there's natural satellites, like the moon, and then there's also man-made satellites that we've made and sent up into space. These satellites we use for GPS and cell phones and all kinds of stuff like that. So moons are natural satellites. Starting with Earth, all the planets Earth and further out away from the sun have moons. And they're just natural satellites. Pluto even has a moon, but because it hasn't cleared out its orbit, it's still not a planet. Asteroids are smaller than planets. They're usually not spherical. So there's an asteroid belt where there are a lot of asteroids, and it's located in between Mars and Jupiter. Some astronomers think that because of Jupiter's size and the gravitational pull of Jupiter and the Sun have kept a planet from forming, and so that's why it's just been a loose collection of rocks, and that's called the asteroid belt. It's between Mars and Jupiter. Comets are different than asteroids. So they're usually a little bit smaller, but they're made of ice and dirt instead of rock like asteroids. When they orbit, they get closer to the sun, and it starts melting that ice. And so the dust and ice comes off, and that's what makes the tail of a comet. So most of the time, comets don't have tails unless they're going closer to the sun. Meteoroids are smaller hunks of rock. They can come from asteroids that have chipped off, or they can come from comets. A meteoroid is in the void of space. And so they're just smaller hunks of rock that are floating around in space. When a meteoroid hits the atmosphere of the Earth, it starts to burn up because of the friction, and that's called a meteor, also known as a shooting star. So a meteor is just a meteoroid that has hit the Earth's atmosphere. A meteor shower usually occurs when we go through the path of where a comet has gone by before. And so it's left behind a lot of particles, and then when we hit those particles, they burn up in our atmosphere. And so that's when we get a whole bunch at once, and so we call that a meteor shower. A meteor is in the atmosphere. A meteorite is a meteor that has actually hit the surface. So a meteorite got in a fight with the Earth. So meteoroid is in the void of space, a meteor is in the atmosphere, and a meteorite got in a fight with the Earth. Just like we learned in the Lego movie, because it rhymes, it has to be true.